Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida Fair Tax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, May 22nd, 2026. This week's Chairman's Report is guest written by Jade Walle. Jade is Vice President of Energy Incorporated, a CPA, and a member of the Americans for Fair Taxation Board of Directors. Let's pit our fellow Americans against each other, Part 1. Early fiscal year 2026 Congressional Budget Office estimates note that of the $5.6 trillion the Treasury expects to collect, $404 billion of it, or 7.1%, will come from the corporate income tax. Now, while $404 billion is certainly a sizable amount, many politicians and pundits continue to call out many nefarious and infamous U.S. corporations for not paying their fair share. Now, if this refrain sounds familiar, that's because there's nothing new under the sun. In fact, ever since the income tax was born in 1913, our nation has perpetually been torn apart by one of the 7 deadly sins, envy. So let's take a brief look at the most recent round of class warfare commentary that risks dividing us even further. Reports from the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy were recently cited in a Thomson Reuters Checkpoint News article by Maureen Letty, dated April 13, 2026. The article provides us the following to consider. At least 88 of the largest U.S. corporations paid no federal income tax in 2025. These 88 companies had $105 billion in collective pre-tax income. Now, rather than paying the 21% corporate income tax rate, these companies received $4.7 billion in tax rebates. Now, the companies identified are from a wide range of industries. They include Tesla, United Airlines, Yum Brands, the owners of KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell, 3M, CVS, and Walt Disney. The ITEP attributes the increase in corporate tax avoidance to the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and also the One Big Beautiful Bill. Several provisions in these laws were cited, including but not limited to accelerated depreciation, research and experimentation credit, and revised guidance on the corporate alternative minimum tax. Now the stage is set. Cue the outrage and class warfare. The article notes that the findings come as some lawmakers question corporations for conducting mass layoffs while simultaneously benefiting from tax cuts and posting record profits. Senator Elizabeth Warren is cited among others. Now, the notion that we live in a free country is paramount in a rebuttal to this feigned outrage. Let me pose a question. Just whose company is it? Do politicians get to dictate our major corporations' policies and staffing configurations? Does the government control the means of production, or does that control rest with our companies via their boards and stakeholders? The article goes on to highlight that after last year's staffing reductions at the IRS, some lawmakers question the agency's ability to audit large businesses and corporate tax returns and close the tax gap. This protest raises an obvious question. Does anyone believe that the IRS can increase its tax code acumen in a meaningful way that would produce enough corporate income tax revenue to finally be enough? Of course not. Doesn't matter how much corporations pay, it's never going to be enough. The fair share, often alluded to by many lawmakers, is a mirage of an oasis on the desert's horizon. They keep moving towards it and pointing to it, but they never seem to get there, leaving us all permanently parched. Now, we've been hearing for decades that corporations are not paying their fair share, but never once has anyone specifically defined what that fair share is. And somehow, no one in the press has ever pinned anyone down and asked, at what point will you be satisfied that a corporation is paying enough in taxes? Well, lastly, we can't forget the profound truth that corporations don't really pay taxes. Their income and payroll tax burdens are simply another cost of doing business that gets accumulated into any company's cost structure. Corporations then have to charge their customer for their product or service based on this cost structure, and hopefully with a little markup so they can make a profit. The bottom line is that corporations don't pay income taxes. We as individuals all do. So, Do these reports and comments exemplify class warfare, strife, and division? When President Lincoln famously said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand," he was pointing to a larger phenomenon of human nature, that we cannot successfully serve two masters because we'll end up hating one and loving the other. The president was specifically alluding to how a nation cannot be half free and half slave. It would eventually become one or the other. Are we also embedded within a similar strand of history and human nature as it relates to the income tax system? If we don't move to a simpler system, do we risk the final tear of our fragile representative republic experiment? Stay tuned for next week's Chairman's Report for the solution. Will the fair tax save the day? In conclusion, as Jade makes clear, our present income payroll tax system breeds envy and encourages Americans to attack tax-paying segments, like corporations. Now, Jade will make the case even clearer in his next article that the fair tax is the answer. The fair tax, H.R. 25, is more than just a proposal for a retail sales tax. It's a fundamental restructuring of the federal fiscal structure. Unlike other excise taxes, which normally are applied to specific products and in different percentage amounts, the fair tax applies a 23% rate to all new retail products and retail services. The fair tax is the answer. The fair tax is a national retail sales tax on new retail goods and retail services. It provides a family credit so that all purchases up to the poverty level for each family are not taxed. There's no withholding from your paycheck, and you never have to file a tax return again telling the government how much you earned and how much you spent. Plus, you'll never be harassed by the IRS ever again because the fair tax abolishes the IRS. Now, many of you have labored tirelessly for freedom from the federal income tax and the IRS. You deserve a great deal of credit for your efforts to educate the American people on the need to fund the American government in a way that's good for America and returns freedom to the American people. It's imperative, though, that we don't replace the current income tax and the IRS with an alternative system that could still be manipulated by the ruling elite. We must let Congress and the President know that the best way to replace the income tax and the IRS is with the fair tax. Now, make no mistake about it. The fair tax is a grave threat to the ruling elites. It will strip them of their power and their ability to control us through the tax system. Their opposition to the fair tax will be fierce and unrelenting. And don't think for an instant they won't use half-truths, deception, and downright lies in their desperate attempts to hang on to their power. However, with the support of this president, we can finally eliminate the income tax and the IRS. Of course, the best course of action is not only to repeal the income tax and abolish the IRS, but to repeal the 16th Amendment as well, so no future administration can ever shackle the American people with an income tax again. We must come together and ensure that real tax reform, the fair tax, is not subverted by the elites in D.C. This will take the diligent effort from all of us. We need your financial assistance, and we need your grassroots assistance. Now, if you have contacts that will allow us to get more information about the fair tax to President Trump, please let us know. Please email us at info@fairtax.org, and we'll give you some options on how you can best help us. At a minimum, please call your congressional representative and ask if he or she supports the fair tax. If so, thank him or her for their support and suggest they become a co-sponsor of H.R. 25 if they're not one already. If not, ask why not. Now, if your representative claims to be unfamiliar with the fair tax, offer to have someone come to their office and explain it to them. The solution? Pass the fair tax. Now, why would D.C. pass the fair tax and give up an almost unlimited source of donations? Well, they won't, at least not voluntarily. The only way they will is if the rest of us demand it. Isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system and the IRS along with it? Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing or investing $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to fairtax.org to invest in AFFT and help us pass the fair tax. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org.